Amara always thought she was the luckiest woman in Kisambi. Her marriage to Daniel looked like a dream. Everyone in the city admired them and people often said, "What a perfect couple." Daniel had charm that could light up any room. He spoke kindly, he carried himself with respect, and in public, he always held Amara's hand as if she was his pride. Amara believed every gesture, every smile, every promise. She would often tell her friends, "Daniel is the kind of man every woman prays for." Daniel worked in a well-known company, and he always told Amara that he stayed late at work just to provide a better life for them. She admired him for that, thinking, "My husband sacrifices his comfort for our future." Every time he walked through the door late at night, tired but smiling, she felt grateful. She never questioned his excuses, never doubted his words. In her heart, she thought their love was strong enough to survive anything. She imagined a future full of children, laughter, and growing old together. For her, Kisambi's noisy streets, the busy markets, and the tall city buildings all seemed brighter because she was walking through life with Daniel by her side. What Amara didn't know was that her perfect marriage was only perfect in her eyes. Behind Daniel's late nights and sweet words, a truth was hiding, one that would soon break her heart and change her life forever. Night after night, Amara found herself sitting alone at the dining table, waiting for Daniel. She would prepare dinner, light a candle, and glance at the clock again and again. Hours passed, and when he finally walked in, his shirt perfectly pressed, his smile practiced, and his body carrying a strong scent of cologne that she knew didn't belong to him, her heart trembled for a moment. But then she would push the thought away. "He is just tired from work. He does this for us," she told herself, choosing trust over suspicion. But loneliness was creeping in, silently and painfully. The house felt bigger, emptier. The laughter they once shared was gone, replaced with excuses and silence. Amara's friends noticed the change. They whispered softly when she entered the room, exchanging knowing looks. One evening, her closest friend Nia asked gently, "Amara, are you sure Daniel is working late every night?" Amara's face flushed with anger. Not at Daniel, but at the suggestion. "Of course. He's working hard for us." "Don't speak against him," she snapped, her pride not allowing her to accept even the hint of doubt. Yet deep inside, her heart was restless. Why did he never answer her calls at night? Why did his eyes shift away when she asked about his work? She told herself over and over, "Love means trust. I must not doubt him." Still, when she lay awake in bed, staring at the empty space beside her, her chest ached with questions she could not silence. The city of Kisambi buzzed outside with lights and noise, but inside Amara's home, the silence was heavy. She longed for his warmth, his laughter, the man who once made her feel like the only woman in the world. But night after night, he slipped further away, leaving her with nothing but shadows, perfume that wasn't hers, and a heart slowly breaking, though she refused to admit it. That evening, Amara's heart was full of hope. She wanted to bring back the love they once shared, so she spent the whole afternoon cooking Daniel's favorite dish. The smell of spices filled the house, and she even wore the dress he once said made her look beautiful. She set the table carefully, placed 2 glasses, and lit a small candle. Tonight, she told herself, would be special. Tonight, Daniel would remember what home felt like. She kept glancing at the door, waiting for the sound of his keys. Every passing minute made her more anxious, but she held on to hope. "Maybe he got stuck in traffic," she whispered to herself. An hour passed. Then 2. The food on the table grew cold, but she refused to touch it. She wanted to eat with him, to laugh with him, to feel like a wife again, not just a woman waiting in silence. By midnight, her hands trembled as she picked up the remote. She turned on the TV, just to distract herself from the emptiness of the room. She flipped through a few channels, barely paying attention, until suddenly her eyes froze. There on the screen was Daniel. He looked nothing like the tired husband she saw at home. He was dressed in a fine black suit, his smile wide, his arm resting comfortably around another woman. The cameras flashed, reporters cheered, and the two of them looked like the perfect couple. Amara's heart stopped. The remote slipped from her hand and crashed onto the floor. For a moment she couldn't breathe. Her chest tightened, her body shook, and tears spilled before she even realized it. The man she had been waiting for, the man she trusted, the man she defended against every whisper, was standing proudly with someone else. Her dinner sat untouched, the candle burned low, and her whole world shattered in silence as the screen kept replaying the scene she wished she could unsee. Amara leaned closer to the screen, hoping her eyes were lying to her. But no, it was Daniel. Her Daniel. He stood tall in a black suit that shimmered under the lights, his hand resting gently on the waist of a woman who was not his wife. The woman was stunning, her dress glittering as she laughed at something Daniel whispered in her ear. Cameras flashed, capturing every smile, every touch, every moment that pierced through Amara's heart like a knife. Reporters crowded around them, shouting his name, praising him as if he were some kind of hero. Daniel laughed confidently, waving at the cameras, his face glowing with joy. It wasn't the tired, stressed man he showed at home. This was a man alive, proud, and comfortable in another woman's presence. Amara's hands shook as she covered her mouth, her eyes burning with tears she could no longer hold back. Her heart screamed, "This cannot be real. This must be a mistake." But the scene kept unfolding, every second louder than the last. The man she defended against whispers, the man she cooked for, the man she stayed awake for, was living another life in front of the whole world, while she sat in her living room, broken and invisible. The food she had cooked hours ago lay cold on the table. The candle flickered weakly, as if mocking her hope. She remembered how she had dressed up for him, how she had waited with love in her heart, only to be rewarded with betrayal broadcast on national television. Amara's tears fell freely now, blurring her vision, but the images on the screen burned deep into her soul. Her body felt heavy, her chest tight, her breath short. It was as if the walls of her home were closing in on her. She grabbed the remote, switched off the TV, and sat in the silence of her shattered world. The noise of reporters still echoed in her ears. The flash of cameras still blinded her. And the smile on Daniel's face haunted her like a cruel reminder. The man she thought she knew was gone. Amara sat frozen in the dim light of her living room, the silence louder than any noise she had ever known. Her hands clutched the remote tightly, her eyes fixed on the dark screen, but in her mind, the images kept playing again and again. Daniel smiling, Daniel holding her, Daniel living a life that did not include her. Each replay stabbed her heart, tearing away the trust she had built over the years. Her tears came slowly at first, then all at once. They rolled down her cheeks, dripping onto her dress, soaking the fabric she had worn to impress him. She wiped them away, but more followed, until it felt like she was drowning in her own sorrow. The same excuse, "I have a late meeting, Amara," echoed in her head like a cruel joke. Those words had become her lullaby on lonely nights, her comfort when doubt tried to creep in. But now she realized they were nothing but lies. Lies that covered nights of betrayal. Her chest ached so deeply that she pressed her hand against it, as if to hold her breaking heart together. She whispered to herself, "Why, Daniel? Why me?" The walls of the house seemed to close in on her, every corner whispering of the love that once filled the space but was now gone. And yet, somewhere beneath the pain, a tiny spark flickered. It was weak, almost invisible, but it was there. Her spirit, though broken, was not destroyed. For every tear that fell, a small voice inside whispered, "You will not die in this pain. You will rise." Amara did not feel strong yet. She felt shattered, empty, forgotten. But deep down, she knew her story would not end in silence. She leaned back against the couch, her body trembling, her face wet with tears. The night stretched endlessly before her, but she did not move. She let herself feel every ounce of betrayal, every drop of heartbreak, because she knew that when the tears finally stopped, something inside her would begin to change. Her world had fallen apart, but in the ashes of her sorrow, strength was quietly being born. By morning, Kisumbi was alive with noise. But this time, it wasn't just the usual sound of traders calling out prices or children laughing in the streets. It was gossip. Everywhere Amara went, voices whispered her name. Women at the vegetable stalls leaned close to each other, their eyes widening with excitement. "Did you see Daniel on TV last night?" one said, her voice sharp. "That woman with him, she wasn't Amara." Another laughed softly. And he looked so happy too, as if he never had a wife at home. Amara could hear every word, even when they tried to pretend they weren't speaking about her. Men shook their heads in pity. Women covered their mouths to hide their smirks. The betrayal that had crushed her in silence the night before was now food for the whole city to chew on. She walked through the busy market with her head held high, her steps steady. On the outside she looked calm, even proud, as if the whispers couldn't touch her. But inside, shame burned her chest like fire. Every laugh felt like an arrow, every stare like a knife cutting into her. She wanted to scream, to ask them all to stop, to tell them they didn't know her pain. But her pride would not let her break in front of them. She stopped at a stall to buy tomatoes. The woman selling them leaned in and whispered, "Amara, I'm so sorry about Daniel. Men can be cruel." Amara forced a smile, nodded politely, and walked away quickly before the tears in her eyes betrayed her. As she moved through the crowd, she realized that the city she loved, the streets she once walked with joy, had now become a stage of humiliation. Her private heartbreak was no longer private, it was entertainment for everyone else. Still she straightened her shoulders, telling herself, "They may talk, but I will not bow my head." The whispers followed her like shadows, but what no one knew was that inside the shame, a different fire was burning. It was the fire of a woman who would not let betrayal define her forever. The night Daniel finally walked through the door, Amara was waiting. She had sat in silence for hours, rehearsing the words in her head, her heart pounding with anger and pain. When he entered, smelling of the same cologne she didn't own, she stood in front of him, blocking his path. "Daniel," she said firmly, her voice trembling but strong, "I saw you with her." For a moment he froze. His eyes flickered with guilt, but it vanished quickly, replaced with arrogance. He tossed his jacket on the chair and laughed coldly. "So, you were watching TV. And what if I was there? That doesn't change the fact that I'm your husband." Amara's voice cracked as tears filled her eyes. "Your husband? You humiliated me in front of the whole city. While I waited for you at home, you were smiling with another woman." Instead of softening, Daniel's face hardened. His voice rose, sharp and cruel. "You should be grateful I even stay with you. Do you think any man in Kisambi would choose a woman like you if he had better options?" The words sliced deeper than any betrayal. Amara's hands trembled, her body weak, but her spirit would not collapse. She whispered, "Grateful? After all the years I gave you, after defending you when people whispered behind my back." Daniel rolled his eyes, his arrogance filling the room. "I gave you this house, this life. Without me, who would you be?" "Nothing." Amara stood still, her tears drying on her cheeks, her pain slowly turning into fire. She realized at that moment that the man before her was no longer the Daniel she had loved, but a stranger filled with pride and cruelty. She did not scream back. She did not beg. She simply stared at him, her silence louder than his shouting. Deep inside something shifted. She knew this was the breaking point. As Daniel stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door behind him, Amara stood alone in the living room. Her heart was shattered, but her pride held her up. She whispered to herself, "I may be broken tonight, but one day, he will see who I truly am." The next morning, Amara could barely get out of bed. Her body felt heavy, her eyes swollen from crying all night. She wanted to hide from the world, to escape the whispers, the stares, the pain. But then there was a knock on her door. It was Nia, her childhood friend, the one who had stood by her since they were little girls in Kisambi. Nia didn't ask for permission. She walked in, sat beside Amara, and held her hand. For a while she said nothing. She just let Amara cry on her shoulder until the sobs slowed down. Then, in a voice soft but strong, she spoke. "Amara, you are not weak. You carry the strength of your ancestors. Do not let his lies define you." Amara lifted her head, her eyes red. "But Nia, everyone saw. They are all laughing at me. He told me I should be grateful he even stays with me." Her voice cracked, breaking into pieces. Nia's eyes burned with anger. "Grateful? For a man who humiliates you? No, Amara. You are the one who gave him honor. You stood by him when no one else did. Without you he is nothing. Don't you see? He is trying to make you small so he can feel big. The words pierced through Amara's despair like sunlight breaking through dark clouds. For the first time since that terrible night, she felt something other than pain. It was anger, yes, but it was also strength. Nia held her face in her hands, looking directly into her eyes. You are more than his wife. You are a woman with a heart, a mind, a destiny. You cannot let his betrayal decide your future. Rise, Amara. Rise for yourself. A silence filled the room, but it was no longer heavy. It was powerful. Amara's tears still fell, but this time they weren't only from sorrow, they carried the beginning of courage. She whispered almost to herself, maybe I can, maybe I will. Nia smiled, squeezing her hand. Not maybe, my sister. You will. And when you do, the same people who laughed today will one day speak your name with respect. In that moment, Amara felt a small flame inside her broken spirit. It wasn't a raging fire yet, but it was enough to make her breathe differently. Enough to remind her that her story was not over. Amara wiped her tears and decided she would not live the rest of her life as a victim. If Daniel had broken her heart in Kisambi, then she would rise in the same city, and everyone would see her strength. With Nia's encouragement, she took her small savings and started something new, an event planning business. At first it felt impossible. She had no big office, no grand reputation, only determination burning inside her. Her first job was decorating a neighbor's small birthday party. Amara poured her heart into it, arranging every detail with care. People who attended whispered in surprise. Who planned this? It's beautiful. Her name began to spread slowly, like fire catching dry grass. Soon, a local couple asked her to plan their wedding. Amara worked day and night, making the ceremony unforgettable. When the bride's family thanked her with tears of joy, Amara felt something she hadn't felt in months: pride. Little by little, her confidence returned. Each event she organized became a canvas for her creativity. Her phone started ringing more often, clients recommended her to friends, and her small business grew. The same Kisambi streets that once carried whispers of her humiliation now carried stories of her talent. Vendors respected her, families trusted her, and her name began to shine brighter than Daniel's ever had. One evening, as she walked home from a successful event, she overheard two women talking in the market. Do you know Amara, the event planner? She's incredible. The women didn't notice her passing by, but those words filled her heart with warmth. For the first time, she wasn't Daniel's wife or the betrayed woman. She was Amara, the strong, talented woman who had built herself from the ashes. Her nights no longer felt lonely. Instead of waiting for footsteps at the door, she stayed awake sketching ideas, planning decorations, dreaming of bigger projects. The pain was still there, but it was no longer her master. She had turned her heartbreak into fuel. In the same city where Daniel's betrayal tried to break her, Amara was now rising higher than she ever imagined. And this time, it was her name that people spoke with admiration, not his. Months later, the story of Kisambi had completely changed. Daniel, once the man admired in public, was now the subject of shame. The woman he had betrayed Amara for had drained his money, ruined his business deals, and finally left him with nothing. He walked the same streets where people once praised him, but now they pointed, whispered, and shook their heads in pity. His arrogance had crumbled, and he was left bankrupt and disgraced. On the other side of the city, Amara's name was shining brighter than ever. Her event planning business had grown beyond anyone's expectations. She was invited to a televised award ceremony to honor her for her success and her contribution to Kisambi's community. That night, dressed in a stunning gown, Amara stood under the bright lights of the TV cameras, the same cameras that once broke her heart. This time, they captured her strength, her beauty, and her victory. Daniel sat at home, staring at the screen in silence. He saw her smiling with pride, heard the crowd cheering her name, and watched as she received her award with grace. His heart was heavy with regret, but Amara never looked his way. She didn't need revenge. Her success was her answer. As she stood tall, her smile radiant, Amara proved to the whole city, and to herself, that betrayal could not destroy her. It had only made her stronger, brighter, and unstoppable. The woman who once cried alone in silence was now a symbol of courage. And Daniel, the man who thought she would remain small, could only sit in the shadows and witness the fire he had tried to extinguish burn brighter than ever.